I'm a believer that this team's going to win the national championship. Something stupid is coming out of his mouth. I don't know. Maybe it's just my age. He needs his vote pulled immediately. And of course, yes, a season like this has to have a name. Let's talk about something good about Justin Freck. What are you doing? Season of dreams. Ohio State, my guys, are either the best or the second best program in the history of college football. This guy is a bonehead. They love him. I question your judgment as an adult. I really do. I was a total hater. I know that for a fact, and I just don't get it. Get us back our sleeves and say, bring me that. That's the one I want. And welcome in. I was talking to Chris on Friday, and he asked me, does this game feel like a top 5 game between Ohio State and Indiana? And my answer on Friday was no. It didn't feel to me like a top 5 game because I just did not believe in this Indiana team. Did not believe they had a shot at Ohio State, and it didn't feel anything like Penn State, certainly nothing like Oregon. So coming out of the game, certainly felt like a top 5 atmosphere, and props to all you guys who went. I talked to several of you after the game. The Buckeye fans were awesome for a 12 o'clock game, certainly treated it like a top 5 game. But after the game, I did a little video asking myself the same thing. Did it feel like a top 5 game now coming out of it? And it didn't. Now, I agreed it didn't to me. I agreed that Indiana deserved that ranking. They 100% did. I had them at 3. If they weren't up there for some people's rankings, then I think that was just straight up brand bias. And I don't like that. They deserve their ranking. But coming out of the game, I didn't feel like, still, it felt like a top 5 game. And then I sat down last night and did my rankings. And sure enough, without a doubt, it was a top 5 game. Felt like a top 5 game to me coming out of it after I did my rankings. And I don't know what it is, but something about this season just feels different with a lot of these teams in the top 10 to me. We've talked about it a lot. The transfer portal taking away a lot of the depth from a lot of the teams like the Alabamas and Georgias and Ole Misses and Ohio State's teams that could, pile up some depth, and injuries changing things because of the portal. Now you're going to, freshmen and second year guys, and teams aren't maybe as good as they once were, but it's just changing the way that I feel about a lot of teams. I just feel like in the past, I could identify what a team was, and we would see more consistency throughout the year. Looking at some of these losses we saw yesterday, when you got a team that can come out and just look like a world beater, and then 2 weeks later look totally incompetent. Like, I'm just not used to seeing this, and just kind of a recalibration. But I want to talk a little more about that Indiana game. I want to go over the rankings because I did do my new rankings. I started all week thinking to myself that this would be off Ohio State's defense versus Indiana's offense. Like, that was going to be the story of this game. And I turned out to be right on that one for sure. It is the fewest yards Ohio State's defense has allowed to a Big Ten opponent since 2021, also against Indiana. But I thought Ohio State would shut their run game down. And they did, if you count sack numbers in there, just 2 yards a carry. That Justice Ellison, I think that's a really good running back. And he had some good ones, but they did pretty well against the run. But I prefer to build those negative sack yards in with the passing game, the pass production. So Curtis Rourke dropped back to pass 23 times. He completed just 8 balls, dropping back 23 times on 18 attempts because 5 of those were sacks. They gained just 68 yards on those completions. And here's where I like to take those yards off, those sack yards. The sacks took off 43 yards, which means 23 dropbacks, you netted 23 yards in your passing game. That is one of the most astounding stats I think I've ever seen in a top 5 game. They netted 23 yards in those 23 dropbacks, 1 yard per dropback to pass. Just an unbelievable performance by the Ohio State defense, by Jim Knowles, by Cody Simon. And if you're someone who's been around here a while, you know that I am captain of the Cody Simon fan club. 10 tackles, 2.5 sacks, forced fumble. Jack Sawyer had a sack and a half, praised Cody after the game as one of the best linebackers in the country. It is disgusting to me that he was not one of 20 semifinalists for the Butkus Award. Indiana, the Buckeye defense held to 1 explosive plays, and that was one of my keys for the game. Limit their explosive plays because they've lived by them all year. Their 2 stud wide receivers, Surratt and Cooper, matched up against 2 corners for Ohio State who have struggled this year. Just 2 catches between the 2 of them. And the Ohio State coaching staff, particularly Jim Knowles, ran circles around Indiana. But let's talk about those special teams. The emphasis on special teams has been amazing. Ryan Day told us in the preseason that they were going to do this, and it felt like they started off the season pushing it. And then it kind of felt like it dropped off. Now, I have long felt and talked about it ad nauseum that this is an area that Ryan Day, in his entire tenure as Ohio State's head coach, has just punted on, totally punted on, did not want anything to do with it. Just get us the ball to the offense. Don't care about it. And it's kind of driven me nuts because all you need to do is put forth some effort in special teams, setting aside the time, practicing it from the top down, making it something where you let the guys know we are prioritizing this. And we saw that under Urban, and we saw the benefits of it. We saw it under Tress. We saw the benefits of it. And Ryan Day has just punted on it, pun intended. And the reason that we know that it's just an effort thing is because we see so many not so good teams be really good at special teams because they know that this is an area they can get an edge on better teams just by putting forth the effort. And sometimes it comes out when you don't expect it, and it just gives you that one extra boost play that you need. And when it comes out in a big game, like it did yesterday, that Caleb Downs return, that only made the score 21-7. But Curt Cignetti said in the press conference that he already felt lucky at halftime being down just 14-7. And when that punt return happened, it panned to the sideline, and you could see Curt Cignetti and the look on his face. He kind of knew where this was going after that. Probably knew it before that. But when you get one like that, after you've been putting forth the effort, and then the 3rd game in a row with a screw up on the punt team or a punt block, just huge plays, huge momentum swingers. And when you've got a close game, that's when it really pays off. But Caleb Downs, with that punt return, 10 years and 1 day since Jalen Marshall last did it against Indiana. They told us they were going to break that streak this year. And Caleb looks so smooth doing it. I took my victory lap after this one on the post-game show. I'm just going to do it again right here. Special players need to be in position to make special plays. And you cannot let fear of injuries keep special players off the field. Like, what are we doing, man? You think about how silly that sounds. We got a special football player, but we're not going to let him play football because we're scared he's going to get hurt playing football. Absolute nonsense. Absolute nonsense. But I sure had to have that argument all offseason because there's not often things to talk about. Caleb Downs, should he or should he not be returning punts, including with my buddy Chad, who told me I can go ahead and appropriately roast him today about that, as he admits he was wrong, and that's okay. As long as we remember this next time, special players can make special plays, so give him the chance. Caleb got the chance. Man, was that sweet. That was so sweet. How about Will Howard? 5 times in C.J. Stroud's career, he had a game with 80% completion percentage. In his career, over 2 seasons, Will Howard broke that this year with 6 games of over 80% completion percentage. The second most accurate quarterback in the country right now, and he just continues to amaze me. We don't see jumps like this late in someone's career. We all expected that completion percentage, which was a knock on him at Kansas State, would get better at Ohio State. We thought that it would come up a little bit. We're talking like 14 percentage points. That's unheard of. And this guy has just come in and improved more and more and more as the season has gone on. The team loves him. Here's what Ryan Day had to say about him yesterday.
14 of 14. What do you see from that makes him so good early?
I think Buckeye Nation is now seen after 11 games this This guy is a winner. He's tough. He cares about his teammates. He's a leader. There was a tough spot this week when we lost Seth in practice, and he, along with the offensive line, Donnie and Josh, really just raised, the spirits of everybody. And that's hard to do when you lose somebody who makes such an impact like Seth. But he's got great resilience, great toughness. He's the heart and soul of our team. But there's more to it than just Will,
I knew that we were getting a guy that was a great leader, but the more we've seen out of him as the year's gone on, the way he was talking after the game about the game coming up and how much he wants to win it for the seniors, for the guys that came back, they just love him, and you can see why. And somebody put in the comments at my post-game show after the game, like, come on, Juck, I know you're a fan, but Will Howard, not a bad game, because I said he hasn't had a single bad game all year, and he hasn't. Coming into the year, I thought that there would be a point in time when Will Howard would have a crappy game, or maybe two in a row, and people would be clamoring for Julian Sayin. Like, I thought that at some point in the season, because of the way the Julian hype was going, I thought at some point in the season, we're going to hear this. We're going to hear it, and it's going to be an annoying conversation because it will be totally ridiculous, but we're going to hear it. Will has not given those folks the opportunity to pop up and say that at all. In fact, he's done nothing but win over people who were hating on him. I have had so many friends who came into this season going, come on, man. This guy, they didn't even want him at Kansas State. He's not going to be as good as McCord. What if it's a wash? What are we doing here? Why would we pay him $1 million? They're just starting him because of $1 million. All the crap, all the competition, and Devin Brown should have won. Like, all of that, when you look at this guy now, how ridiculous does it sound? He's one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the country. And if you don't see it, I understand, because it was brainwashed nonstop that the guy's just average all offseason. He's not average. He's not. The throw he made yesterday to Emeka in the corner of the end zone, just adding on to those big-time throws that he made last week at Northwestern. The guy is really, really good. And every time he drops back, I feel comfortable as hell. And when you talk about the leadership heading into the game, heading into the playoffs, how good do you feel versus the situation last year with the quarterback? And one of the biggest knocks from the quarterback last year was the lack of that. It's a leadership position, man. It just is. You can't be a fly on the wall. At least most of the successful ones are not. And this guy, with his play and with that, he's ready to run through a wall for his teammates, and they are for him as well. As for that game yesterday, obviously, Travion Henderson busts off the big one in the end. And our guy Dylan Davis asked about Ryan Day after Travion slides, coming in and sneaking the ball in for a touchdown. Let's hear what RD had to say about that.
There, and was there ever a question of him not returning punts in terms of injury or the risk reward there?
Yes. Oh yeah. We take everything into consideration, and we made the decision a couple of weeks ago that we felt Caleb, really about midway through the season, after the Oregon game, we just felt like Caleb needs to be more involved and make more an impact on games. I think that what's been happening on defense, is kind of on that play to go turn good into great, and again, a game-changing play.
Over to the right, Dylan Davis, Delaware Gazette.
Ryan, the end of the game offensively for you, that was an interesting sequence. Trey goes down at the 1 yard line. You decide to run 2 plays anyways to score. What was that decision all about, and was there anything to that?
Well, at the end of the game, we're in a 4-minute drill, like you saw in the Penn State game. We call that downtime, which means, once we get the first down in that moment, we feel like the game's probably over. He scored it free and brought it all the way down to the 1 yard line. And I think maybe it triggered, like, at the last second, oh boy, I got to get down here. So we didn't have to put our defense back on the field. Then we decided to at least milk 45 seconds off the clock. We're on the 1 yard line, and we just felt like we wanted to put an exclamation point on the win by go ahead and sneaking it in.
We'll get a little more into that decision in a little bit. Let's just say the Indiana folks not happy, and welcome to big boy football, competing for playoff spots and playoff seeding. A little ridiculous. It seems like they're maybe taking out their anger on that because they've got nothing else to take it out on. I don't know, but a couple of their columnists wrote some choice things about Ohio State, and we'll go over that. But we're here, guys. This week, now that we've entered it, usually produces a lump in my throat come Wednesday, heartburn on Thursday, the sweats on Friday, and man, stay the hell away from me on Saturday, as we are in game week. It's not an enjoyable week for me. It's not an enjoyable game for me until the clock hits 0, unless of course it's getting away from. It's a stressful time, man. It's a stressful time because it means so much, because I find myself somehow interacting with the other side so much and have to hear them so much. What I don't like is what they're setting up right now. They are setting this up right now as if they don't really care about this year's version because they got Bryce Underwood, and things are just changing now for them up there. So whatever, it's not that big of a deal. Of course, we know how big of a deal it is. We know how bad it hurts. I also heard my buddy Johnny talking the other day, and he was on with Chris and Ron, and he was talking about Ohio State fans don't want to beat good Michigan teams. They want to beat bad Michigan teams. And it's interesting because you can't say the same about them. Ohio State's never bad. Never. Like, how many times have we gone into this game knowing that if this game plays out like it should, Ohio State smokes them? More times than not in my life, by lots and lots of games. In my formative years were through the 90s, where most of those games Ohio State lost, was favored, should have won, more talented team, built better. And it's a lot of the reason that I go into this game every week with this lump in my throat. But how did you feel the last 3 years? Like, for me, it started to just feel like at the end of the week, at the end of the season, it was a formality that we would win that game. And after loss number 1, I felt like whatever, it was a one-off. And after loss number 2, I went into game number 3 of the three-peat thinking the same thing, full of confidence. And now as we head into this game this week, I feel the same way. I feel a ton of confidence, and obviously their team is nowhere near as good as it was last year. But sometimes we've seen just crazy stuff happen in this one. Should I not be so confident? Should I temper my expectations? I don't know. I'm sure we'll talk about this a lot as the week goes on. But right now, as I sit here, there's a 24-point line. 24 points. This game should not be close. They did just have their best game against Northwestern. Their quarterback threw for almost 200 yards. Khalil Mullings rushed for almost, 3 touchdowns, not a ton of yards, but their best game, they scored 50 points. 50 points. We've talked about their offense being so anemic. Weird things can happen in this game. Maybe I should not be so confident, but I'm already looking forward to the following week. And let's talk about the following week. Number 1, I want to know how many of you guys are planning on going to the championship game. If the Buckeyes win against the team up north next week, it is the Big Ten championship game against Oregon, who has clinched their spot no matter what, even if they lose to Washington in the final game, and Ohio State. Now, we talked coming into this year about the potential of Ohio State and Oregon playing 3 times, that it exists. And the way this is played out, guys, not only does it exist, it is now very likely that Ohio State and Oregon are going to play 3 times this year. The way they are rated right now, they're seeded 1 and 2. They're going to go into the Big Ten championship game, most likely seeded 1 and 2. And when they go in there seeded 1 and 2, the loser of that game is very likely, almost positive, going to get the 5 seed. So whoever that is that gets the 5 seed, whether that's Ohio State, whether that's Oregon, you got one team's going to get the 1 seed, one team's going to get the 5 seed. Almost certain. Now, the 1 seed and the 5 seed are on the same side of the bracket. So that means, let's say Oregon wins the game and they're the 1 seed. They need to win their first round game to make it to the semifinal. Well, not their first round, I'm sorry. It's the second round game. They get a bye. So they win their first game, and they make it to the semifinal. Then let's say Ohio State gets the 5 seed. They win in the first round and win in the second round to make it to the semifinal. And then you've got the rematch between Ohio State and Oregon for the 3rd time in a year. And both Ohio State and Oregon are going to be favored all the way to there. So I think it's probably more likely than not. At this point, we are going to see 3 matchups between Ohio State and Oregon. And what a way to start an interesting first year with Oregon coming in, with the recruiting battles that if you've watched me, you know, we've highlighted it a lot. And there's been some wars for some of these dudes. Some twists, some turns, them pulling out some Ohio dudes. It's been fun. It's been exciting. It's been pretty evenly played. Then you get the first game. It's a 1-point game. Who's going to win the Big Ten championship? We certainly don't want them coming in their very first year winning the Big Ten championship. And then when it really counts in the playoffs, a matchup in the Final Four to get to the national championship game is what we could be looking at. Remember, the new Big Ten schedule, they call it the flex schedule, guarantees that you play each team in the Big Ten 2 times every 5 years. That's all we're guaranteed to play everybody except for the team up north. That's it. 2 times every 5 years or 4 times a decade. That's all we're guaranteed to play Oregon. 4 times a decade. And we could knock 3 matchups out in a single year, year number 1. And the way both programs are set up now and the way the rest of the Big Ten looks, it looks pretty likely that in the next 3-4 years, Ohio State and Oregon are set up to potentially meet in the playoffs, potentially meet in the Big Ten championship a few more times. Outside of the blue, we might end up playing the green the second most amount of times of anybody else in the league. It's pretty interesting, but to play them 3 times year 1, that's going to be fun. I mean, game 1 was incredibly fun. Game 2, who's going to Indianapolis? Who already bought their tickets? I want to know. It's going to be lit. And if you've never been to Lucas Oil, that is a cool place to watch a game. I really like it. Downtown Indy's cool as hell. So we got to take that puppy over. But it's almost like, man, do I want to spend the money to go to the Big Ten championship game when Ohio State's guaranteed to have a playoff game, either a neutral site game if they win or a home game the following week? That's tough. Or is it 2 weeks after that? Round 1, like 10 days or something. Who cares? The point is, if you're someone like me who really only likes to go to one big game in the postseason, or, you know, one big, because it's a pain, man. It's expensive. It's a pain in the butt. I don't like to do it more than once a year, you know, one big football trip. When do you want to do it? Do you want to do it in the Big Ten championship game? Do you want to wait for the playoff game because you're guaranteed that game? It's not like sometimes you want to, you know, when we make it to the playoffs, right? Am I going to go to the first playoff game, or am I going to save up and buy that national championship ticket and roll the dice, not going to game 1? It's different this time. Interested to hear if anybody's got any thoughts on that. And that's that with that. Anyway, appreciate you guys so much. Thank you for joining me on the hell day is it? Who cares? We were just talking football. I'll talk to you guys later. Have a good one. Hey, it's Juck.
Juck? Who the f- is Juck?
Juckonbucks.
Juckonbucks. Juckonbucks?
Juckonbucks.
My guy Juck. Juckonbucks.
My buddy Juck.
Juck is the Juck.
It's Juckonbucks. Okay.
Juck is junk.
The Juck eyes. The
Juck eyes.
Juckonbucks.
Junk. Juck. Not junk. Juck.